For as long as I can remember, sculpting was the rhythm of my life. Every thump of mallet against chisel, every slow pull of wet clay between my palms, felt like a conversation with the deepest part of me. Critics in Madrid once claimed they could spot a Camila Álvarez silhouette from across a gallery floor. Sleek curves, raw edges, restless energy captured in stone. Yet for the past 5 months, I'd sat in my studio staring at untouched marble that seemed to stare back, mocking me with its silence. Nothing worked. The sketches in my notebook were half-hearted scratches. Long walks along the Manzanares River, classical guitar concerts, even midnight wanderings through El Retiro. None of it fired the old spark. People called it sculptor's block, but it felt larger, as if the very pulse inside my veins had slowed. When an old mentor emailed about an intensive art retreat in rural Andalusia, 50 kilometers inland from Malaga, in a converted olive oil mill turned artist haven, I booked a seat on the first train south. They promised space, sunlight, and time. I prayed they also offered miracles. The village of Zahara de la Sierra greeted me with whitewashed houses terraced along a hill, stone lanes scented with rosemary, and a fortress tower keeping watch like an aging king. The retreat itself sat lower in the valley, a cluster of renovated stone barns wrapped by olive groves and orange trees, cicadas buzzing like lazy metronomes under the May sun. Mornings began with guided mindfulness in a courtyard framed by bougainvillea. Afternoons we worked in open-air studios that smelled of damp clay and cooling limestone. Evenings ended with communal dinners, paella bubbling in massive pans, laughter rising toward a sky brilliant with stars. I tried to surrender to the routine. Breathing exercises, charcoal figure studies meant to loosen the eye, hour-long sessions at the wheel to remember play. But every time I faced the block of Maquettes marble I dragged to my workstation, my hands froze. I knew there was a woman trapped inside that stone, a figure meant for the entrance of the new Museo de Arte Contemporáneo in Madrid, but the vision refused to come. On the third afternoon, while shaping a practice bust that looked more like an egg than a face, I caught sight of her. She arrived late, speaking softly to the retreat coordinator in lilting Castilian accented by something older, maybe Galician coast wind or Canary Island sun. Her name, I learned later, was Lucía Serrano. She'd been hired as a live reference for those of us struggling with anatomy. Lucía wasn't conventionally statuesque, yet every movement felt choreographed by ancient gods. The tilt of her neck as she lifted her dark curls into a loose knot, the effortless sway of her hips in wide-leg linen trousers, the sure placement of bare feet on warm terracotta tiles. Sunlight loved her skin, olive brushed with gold, so much that the shadows clinging to her collarbones looked like deliberate strokes of charcoal. When our gazes touched, something inside me shifted, a faint vibration beneath my sternum. She offered a polite smile, as models often do, but there was a quiet confidence beneath it that unsettled me more than any overt flirtation could have. I told myself it was nothing, just gratitude for a fresh form to study, but my chisel slipped, nicking the clay bust's cheek. Over the next 2 days Lucía became a gentle constant, reading a paperback beside the fountain during breaks, stretching on a Pilates mat under the orange trees, or posing silently while painters captured her in oils. I tried to keep my focus on the marble block, yet my attention orbited her like a restless moon. The retreat's evening workshop, rekindling intention through touch, paired sculptors with live models so we could feel bone and muscle under guidance, translating sensation into form. I nearly skipped it, afraid my stagnant creativity would embarrass me. But pride shoved me through the studio doors. Cool twilight spilled through open shutters, carrying orange blossom air. Work tables circled the room. Lumps of fresh clay waited beneath damp cloth. Lucía sat on a wooden stool near the center, back straight, one knee drawn up, the loose sleeve of her ivory blouse slipping to reveal a smooth shoulder. The instructor beckoned me forward. "Camila," she said, "why not begin with a simple study of the clavicle?" My heart pounded. I dipped my fingers into the clay, rolled it into a rope, and stepped closer to Lucía. "Is this okay?" I asked, voice embarrassingly small. Lucia's eyes met mine. Dark, steady, inviting. "Of course. I trust you." Those 3 words shook something loose. Gently, I mapped the ridge of her collarbone with thumb and forefinger, then pressed my clay to mimic the contour. The material responded, yielding alive, in a way stone never does. A spark stirred deep inside my chest, bright enough to sting. Minutes slid into an hour. I shaped the gentle hollow at the base of her throat, the slope of her shoulder, the subtle curve where rib met sternum. Lucia's breath remained slow, almost meditative, yet every now and then her lashes fluttered, and the tiniest hitch in her inhalation matched the tremor in my stomach. When the session ended, the studio emptied quickly, artists eager for sangria under the courtyard lanterns. I stayed, cleaning tools with clumsy diligence. Lucia lingered too, slipping the blouse back over her shoulder. The quiet between us felt thick, charged. "You work like you're listening for music inside the clay," she said, voice low. "I'm afraid I haven't heard a note in months," I admitted. She moved closer, studying the small bust I'd shaped of her upper torso. The likeness was rough, but the energy, raw, reaching, was unmistakable. Lucia touched the damp surface, then turned that touch toward my wrist, fingers warm against skin still dusted with terracotta. "Maybe you're listening in the wrong language," she whispered. "Stone is silence. Clay is breath. What if the figure you're trying to free isn't trapped in marble at all?" The idea hit like a bell in a cathedral. Clear, resonant, undeniable. My next inhale tasted of possibility. Lucia's hand remained on my wrist a beat too long. Heat spread up my arm, settled low in my abdomen. For the first time in half a year, my pulse matched the rhythm of creation instead of dread. "Will you pose for me again tomorrow?" I asked, surprised by the boldness in my voice. A slow smile curved her lips, equal parts promise and challenge. "Tomorrow at sunrise by the old olive press," she said. "If you bring the clay, I'll bring the music." I watched her walk into the indigo evening, hips swaying to a song only she could hear. The studio lights glowed golden around her silhouette, and I realized I was already sculpting her in my mind. Every line, every shadow, chasing the melody she'd awoken. Back at my workstation, I lifted the mallet. The marble no longer looked like a coffin of dead possibilities. It looked like a door someone had finally left unlocked. Tonight, I thought, I'll sketch until my hands ache. And at dawn, when Lucia arrives, I'll begin again. With clay, with courage, with the heartbeat she just returned to me. The block of stone waited, silent but no longer hostile, as the Andalusian night hummed outside, full of wind and orange blossom and the first faint notes of a statue begging to be born. The dawn air in Zahara was thinner than night, cool enough to sting bare skin that only hours earlier had sweated beneath candlelit arches. I reached the abandoned olive press before first light, lugging a rough wooden crate filled with clay, wire tools, and a new sketchbook. The ancient stone wheels loomed like gray sentinels in the half-dark, slick with dew that shimmered under a paling indigo sky. Somewhere up the hill a rooster crowed once, ragged, sleepy, then fell silent as though even he sensed the hush that clung to this hour. Lucia arrived without sound, stepping from the grove as if the trees themselves had peeled back to let her pass. She wore a loose white camisole tucked into linen trousers the color of wet sand. Her curls were twisted into a high knot, strands escaping to brush her neck. In one hand she held an old portable speaker, paint splattered and dented at the corners. With a shy smile she set it atop the press, thumbed a button, and low guitar chords floated into the stillness. Rodrigo y Gabriela, fast fingers turned soft to greet the sun. "Music," she said, voice husky with sleep. "You said you'd listen better if someone changed the language." I managed a nod, pulse already fluttering. We agreed she would start seated on a low stone drum, knees angled sideways, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted toward the first blush of light. "No elaborate shapes," she'd insisted last night. "Your hands know what I look like. Let them tell the story." The moment my palms met clay, time slipped its leash. I pressed and pinched, smoothing torso and hip, coaxing form from damp earth while dawn unfolded behind her, peach and burning gold. Lucia stayed utterly still except for breath and the occasional tremor of a muscle holding too long. Each time she shifted, the new curve felt like permission, an invitation to capture what changed beneath my fingertips. Yet the real transformation wasn't in the clay. It was inside me. The marble block I'd abandoned in the studio no longer felt like a monument to failure. It was a promise waiting its turn, patient as stone could be. For now, this clay maquette, small, alive, pulsing with the indentation of Lucia's ribcage, became a heartbeat I could hear again. Halfway through the session, the sun cleared the ridge, flooding the press in amber light. Lucia's camisole turned translucent at the edges, hinting at skin darker where fabric clung. My throat tightened with an ache that was more than artistic hunger. I forced myself to focus on the sculpture, but when I shaped the dip of her waist, my thumb brushed real flesh, warm and slick with dew. She inhaled sharply. "Cold," she whispered, though nothing about the morning felt cold. My apology tangled with nerves. "Sorry, Her gaze held mine, steady, unreadable. "Don't apologize for touching what you create," she said, voice threaded with something electric. "Just make sure you finish it." I didn't trust my voice, so I pressed the clay again, gentler this time, letting silence fill with guitar arpeggios and birdsong rising from the valley. The sky brightened to cobalt. Bees stirred inside purple blossoms along the ruined wall. Time stretched like hot sugar. When the church bells in the village tolled 8, Lucia eased out of the pose, rotating her shoulders with a grimace. "I can't feel my legs," she laughed. I offered my scarf. She dabbed damp skin along her collarbone, eyes darting to the half-formed figure on the wooden turntable. "It's fierce," she murmured, stroking a clay shoulder. "But she's still caged. What's holding you back?" I glanced at my hands, thumbs smudged grief brown. "I think I'm afraid if I finish her, I'll lose this feeling. Like the music stops once the dance ends." Lucia wiped a streak of clay across my cheek, playful. "Then don't end the dance." That afternoon the retreat announced its midweek excursion, a hike to Roman ruins perched above a gorge. Most participants buzzed with tour guide excitement. I stared at my marble block instead, hands itching for the chisel after weeks of paralysis. But Lucia tugged my sleeve. "Come," she said, eyes shining. "Stones remember stories older than both of us. Maybe they'll tell you theirs." So I went. We hiked narrow switchbacks where wild lavender brushed our calves and vultures circled overhead. At the summit, sun-struck pillars jutted from scrub like giant ribs. Shadows collapsed into sharp angles across mosaic shards. I wandered among toppled columns, fingertips grazing ancient grooves, and felt the faint echo of hammer blows from 2 millennia ago. Carvers who never signed their names had breathed life into marble here. Now their gods lay shattered under olive branches. Lucia joined me beside a weathered frieze depicting Hera crowned with pomegranates. "She's chipped, but look at her jaw," she said, tracing the broken line in stone. "Strength survives longer than beauty." I studied the fracture, a jagged lightning bolt across the goddess's throat, and unexpectedly pictured my own stalled commission for the museum, a modern Iberian goddess of resilience. The concept had felt pompous in Madrid's studio lights. But here, dust sticky on my skin, Hera's stubborn profile dared me to carve nerve instead of perfection. A breeze rustled Lucia's curls. A petal from distant almond trees drifted between us. She tucked it behind my ear. "You're thinking louder than you speak," she teased. "I just realized my statue doesn't need to be flawless," I admitted. "She needs to breathe." Lucia's smile softened. "So carve the breath." We lingered until the instructor called everyone back to the trail. On the descent she walked ahead, humming the same guitar melody from Sunrise. Each time her voice slipped into wordless vowels, something inside me thrummed in harmony. Night fell with a sultry breeze that smelled of figs and river mud. The retreat kitchen served tapas under string lights, tortilla española, grilled padrón peppers popping with sea salt, ceramic jugs of tinto de verano sweating on plank tables. Conversation blurred into wine-warm laughter. I tried to join, but my focus skittered between Lucia's mouth and the knowledge that she would leave tomorrow for another modeling gig in Seville. I hadn't asked. She'd volunteered it over lunch, casual as describing the weather. A pang of urgency coiled tight in my belly. When dessert bowls clinked empty, she rose and slipped toward the orchard path, moonlight pooling in dusty footprints. Without thinking I followed, pulse hammering. We met beneath an ancient olive whose trunk twisted like intertwined lovers. Silver leaves whispered overhead, scattering shards of moonlight on her face. She leaned against the gnarled bark, arms folded, gaze unreadable. "You're leaving." My voice cracked, betraying more than friendship. "Tomorrow after breakfast." She exhaled slowly. "Most retreats are in and out. My life's a patchwork of moments. I don't usually linger." Wet clay still rimmed my fingernails. I clenched the fist so she wouldn't see it tremble. "What if I need more time to finish?" Lucía stepped closer, hazel eyes flicking between mine. "Finish the sculpture or finish what started this morning?" Heat surged up my throat. "Both." Her smile curved, soft but fierce. "Then ask." I swallowed pride and fear in one breath. "Stay one more day." For a heartbeat nothing but cicadas answered. Then she pressed her palm to my chest, right over the frantic staccato. "Tell me why," she whispered. "Say it. Not for the art, for you." The confession tore free. "Because when you walk into a room, the stone in me starts to move. Because I don't just want your pose. I want your stories, your worst jokes, the scar on your knee you try to hide. I want to carve a life that has you in it, Lucía." Leaves rustled like applause. Her eyes shone wet, and when she spoke her voice was ragged velvet. "One day won't be enough. Then we'll steal more," I said, breathless. "A week, a month, whatever it takes." She laughed, a small, incredulous sound, and kissed me, slow and grounding, fingers sliding into my hair as if anchoring herself to the promise. I tasted wine and salt and something newly born. When we parted, our foreheads touched. "I'll rearrange Seville," she whispered. "But tomorrow at dawn we go back to that marble. No clay, no excuses. You free the goddess, and I'll be there, breathing with her." I nodded, tears pricking hot behind my eyes. Not sorrow but the unbearable relief of momentum. Together we walked back toward lantern light, our shadows merging on the dusty path. Above us, the Andalusian moon hung ripe and watchful, as if chiseled into the sky by some long-forgotten sculptor who understood what Lucía had just taught me. Flaws are the openings where life pours in, and stone only sings when someone is brave enough to strike. The sky over Zahara was still ink blue when Lucía knocked on my cabin door. I'd barely slept, too wired, too terrified. Not of failure this time, but of the immensity of what would happen if I actually succeeded. I opened the door to find her cradling 2 steaming tin cups of café con leche. Hair bundled inside a crocheted beanie, cheeks flushed from the chill. "No backing out," she murmured, pressing 1 cup into my trembling hands. "We've already stolen the day." Minutes later we crossed the courtyard, our breaths ghosting in the lantern glow, until the studio barn swallowed us whole. The big space smelled of dusted marble and turpentine. Overhead fixtures hummed, casting gold across vacant easels. In the center, my untouched slab of maquette rose like a frozen wave. The iron stand had felt like a gallows all week, but today, with Lucía's palm warm against my lower back, it looked almost merciful, an uncarved future begging to be shaped. She pulled a Bluetooth speaker from her tote. Yesterday's Rodrigo y Gabriela riff filled the rafters, upbeat enough to cut the hush. Then, without ceremony, she towed off her sandals and shed the oversized linen shirt she wore as a jacket. Underneath, a simple black sport top hugged her ribs. Loose drawstring pants clung to hips I knew the weight of in my hands. "Pose or coach?" she asked. "Both," I breathed. I slid the first tooth-edged chisel into its wooden mallet handle, the click echoing like a starter's pistol. And then I struck. Not timid taps, blows that rang through the barn and ricocheted in my sternum. Chips flew in pale arcs, scattering across the tarp like shards of moonlight. The rhythmic assault felt violent, glorious, necessary, each strike a syllable of language I'd forgotten how to speak. Lucía circled me in deliberate dancer-slow steps, calling out when my wrist stiffened, when my shoulder hunched. Breathe into the hit, she instructed, demonstrating. Inhale, lift, crack, a phantom swing through air. Whenever doubt slithered in, I looked at her and the marble seemed softer for it. An hour in, dawn spilled through the high windows, washing the room in rose gold. Sweat dampened the collar of my tee, dust whitewashed my forearms, and the raw outline of a woman, a goddess or rebel, I wasn't sure which, emerged from the stone. One leg stepped forward, the hip angled, weight thrown onto a bold stride. She was walking out of the block, shoulders squared, chin lifted. Imperfect, asymmetrical, alive. I paused to drink water, lungs burning. Lucia approached, eyes shining. Without speaking, she brushed marble dust from my cheek, then guided my hand back to the chisel. "The ribs next," she whispered. "Let her breathe." Her fingers rested over mine as I set the tool, and for 3 heartbeats we held the same hammer. Her pulse riding the tremor in my wrist. I struck. A thin sliver peeled away, revealing a shallow curve beneath. Another, deeper, and the suggestion of lungs expanded inside the rock. I felt dizzy, drunk on limestone and proximity. When the retreat bell clanged for breakfast, I flinched as though waking from a trance. Around us, other artists filtered in, murmuring awe. Some lifted phones for discreet photos. Others simply watched, eyes wide, as if glimpsing a private prayer made public. I hated the sudden attention, but Lucia squeezed my shoulder. "Let them witness," she said. "She's yours, but she was born for more than silence." We broke only long enough to gulp fresh orange juice and crusty bread. Every minute away from the statue felt like betrayal. Back in the barn, I attacked the stone anew, chasing the curve of spine, the cant of raised chin. Hours folded over themselves until noon sun painted rectangles on the floorboards. Mid-swing, a crisp voice cut through the music. "Señorita Álvarez, I thought we'd lost you to abstraction forever." Spun. Martín Delgado, Madrid's most exacting museum commissioner, and the man who'd advanced half my fee 6 months ago, stood in the doorway. A linen suit too pristine for a retreat clung to his tall frame. His assistant hovered behind, iPad poised. My stomach plunged. I'd missed 2 progress deadlines already. Now he had come to drag my shame into daylight. "Señor Delgado," I said, wiping dust on my jeans. "I didn't expect." "Clearly." His gaze flicked to the half-form, then to Lucia, then back to me. "Your agent mentioned an artistic detox. I feared it meant vacation. Yet you are working." He strode closer, shoes crunching chips underfoot. Interesting posture. Forward momentum, defiant chin. "She'll command the foyer." For the first time since he entered, hope flickered until he added, "Provided you finish before the gala." 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I'd need to transport the block, refine details, polish, seal. Impossible without round-the-clock labor. My pulse hammered in my ears. Lucia slipped beside me. "She can do it," she said, calm as still water. Delgado's brows lifted at her presence, but he only nodded. "Very well. A transport crew will collect the piece in 2 days. You'll complete refinement in Madrid." 2 days. I hadn't even carved hands, the face, the thousands of micro-gestures that give stone a soul. "Wait," I blurted. "If I send her early, I'll lose momentum. Please allow a week." Martin's phone chimed. He glanced at it, impatient. 3 days, Camila. Or the board reallocates sculpture funds to the kinetic installation. He pivoted and left. The barn door slammed like a verdict. Silence fell so thick I feared it would crush the goddess back into shapeless rock. I stared at the statue, at the jagged planes where eyes would live, at hands still fused to her thighs. The impossible countdown carved fear into my ribs. Lucia stepped in front of me, blocking the sculpture from view. "Look at me," she said. Her palms cupped my jaw, smearing marble dust across both our cheeks. "We have 3 days. Then 3 more in Madrid if I come with you." The notion hit like a mallet. Lucia in my capital studio, under my city's neon nights, breathing the same air long enough to become routine, not miracle. "Your Seville contract." "I cancelled this morning," she cut in, eyes fierce. "Told them I'd found a larger commission." I laughed, half delirious, half weeping. "You did." "I did." She brushed her thumb over my lips. "But first we need help. Carve. I'll recruit." By evening a silent army of retreat artists had gathered, bribed with sangria and the promise of their names on the Gala program's thank you page. Ceramicists trimmed excess stone with rifflers. Painters mixed graphite slurry wash to mark shadow planes. Even the watercolorist, a gentle retiree named Elena, sanded the emerging calf smooth with reverent strokes. We worked under floodlights until owls claimed the sky. Lucia commandeered logistics, sharpening chisels, rotating volunteers when muscles trembled, feeding me bites of manchego and almonds so I wouldn't forget to eat. At 2 a.m. she forced me outside, hands on my shoulders, to stare at the Perseid meteors streaking above the fortress. "Breathe," she whispered against my ear. "Remember why she walks." I closed my eyes, inhaled night jasmine, and felt the goddess thrum beneath the barn roof, alive with every heartbeat in that room. Day 2 blurred. Carve, sand, rinse, repeat. Blisters split. Forearms screamed. Yet by dusk the face had emerged, strong-browed, lips parted as if mid-command. I modeled her eyes on Lucia's, but tilted skyward, defiant. When I finished the last pass of a fine rasp across her cheekbone, Lucia pressed a damp cloth to my neck. "She looks like she knows secrets," she said. "She does," I answered, voice raw. "They're yours." Exhaustion threatened to unravel me, but there was still the matter of hands. Stone fingers are treacherous. One slip can shear an entire week's work. I dreaded them most. Yet the goddess could not stride half-made. Late that night, Lucia guided me to a stool and placed a smooth block of practice marble in front. "Warm up," she insisted. She sat opposite, palms up on her knees. "Copy me." Under lamplight, I traced every dip from her thumbnail crescent to the slight callus near her ring finger, carving miniature studies until dawn pinked the windows. By then I knew her hands the way singers know their favorite key. The fear eased. On the third morning the transport truck rumbled up the gravel drive. Delgado's assistant jumped down, clipboard ready. Panic iced my veins, but when I removed the final support rods, the goddess stood complete. Unfinished in polish perhaps, but vibrantly whole. Her left arm swung forward, fingers splayed as though slicing wind. The right hand rested against her sternum, 2 fingertips grazing the hint of a battle scar I'd cut across the marble, a tribute to imperfection. The crew wrapped her in padded blankets while I packed chisels and sanding blocks. Lucia boarded the van without asking, squeezing beside the statue's crate. I climbed in after her, numb with adrenaline. The retreat shrank in the mirror. White barns, olive trees, sunrise-lit hills, until it vanished behind a dust plume. As the miles unspooled, Lucia laced her dusty fingers through mine. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I watched golden fields race past and felt the vibration of the road in my bones. "I'm thinking she's not the only one walking into a new city without armor." Lucia leaned her head on my shoulder. "Madrid will love her," she said. "And I will love watching you scare every patron who thinks they can tame you." I laughed, hoarse, hopeful. Ahead, the highway ribboned north, and with it came doubts. 6 weeks of sanding bureaucrats, critics who dissect art like autopsies. But Lucia squeezed my hand once, grounding me in the here and now. And I realized the chisels I feared most were no longer in my toolkit. They were in my chest, reshaping a life I'd let fossilize. The marble statue was only the first unveiling. The next would be learning how to carve space for a woman who could stop the world by simply breathing beside me. Madrid's skyline rose on the horizon, jagged and sun-flared, promising triumph or tragedy or some tangled braid of both. The truck rumbled forward, unchecked. I closed my eyes, feeling Lucia's pulse sync with mine, and braced for the hammer's next strike. Madrid swallowed us like a splash of turpentine on fresh paint. Sharp, dizzying, impossible to ignore. The transport van rattled through morning traffic until the museum's service gate yawned open, and our battered crate rolled into an industrial-sized lift. The conservation wing, my temporary studio, was a cavern of skylights and echoing footsteps. Humidity monitors blinked green along the walls, as if the building constantly checked its own pulse. Delgado's assistant catalogued every chip of marble dust, every tool. Paperwork piled like snowfall. Lucia and I, still streaked with Zahara dirt, signed forms that essentially traded our sleep for fluorescent daylight and security passes. When the last signature dried, Delgado materialized in the doorway, impatience vibrating off his pressed suit. 6 weeks, he repeated, tapping the brass plate where the gala date was etched. No extensions. Alcaldesa Lopez herself wants the unveiling. I forced a confident nod. Inside, panic bit like winter wind. Lucia laced her fingers with mine, grounding me. We changed into coveralls and built a rhythm that felt almost holy. Mornings rough sanding, midday detailing with diamond rasps, evenings buffing with pumice and linen until the goddess glimmered beneath halogen lamps. Lucia became my shield against bureaucracy, fielding curators' questions, fetching hidden chisels from antique shops, bribing the night guard with jamon sandwiches so we could stay after hours. Once, at 2 a.m., our laughter echoed too loudly and the guard knocked twice in warning. We answered with muffled giggles, cheeks flushed, bodies coated in marble dust that made our hair look prematurely gray. Crack in the stone. Halfway through week 3, disaster struck. While undercutting the curve of the goddess's forward arm, my chisel slipped, shaving too deep along the wrist. A hairline fracture spider-webbed up the forearm. Tiny, almost invisible, but fatal if it propagated. The room seemed to tilt. I tasted iron on my tongue. Lucia was across the studio cataloging sandpaper grades. I couldn't call out. My voice lodged somewhere between heart and throat, but she felt the shift in air and rushed over. Together we ran our fingertips across the cold fissure. My breathing hitched, a dam about to burst. She said nothing at first, simply lifted my trembling hand and kissed the bruised knuckles. Then she whispered, "Stone remembers heat. We'll cauterize the wound." I stared, uncomprehending, until she produced a slim diamond microdrill from the supply cabinet, a conservation technique I'd read about but never dared attempt. Under a jeweler's loupe and Lucia's steady torchlight, we bored minuscule anchor holes along the fracture, syringed in epoxy tinted with pulverized marble, then clamped the arm in a custom splint of padded brass. The process lasted all night. By dawn, the resin had cured. The fracture vanished beneath a powder of matching dust. I sagged against a workbench, tears hot on my cheeks. Lucia wiped them away with her dusty sleeve and whispered, "She's stronger in the places she broke. Remember that." I kissed her with the desperate gratitude of someone hauled from a precipice by a single hand. The storm outside, the calm within. The following weeks blurred into a montage of midnight coffee, radio static, and the scent of beeswax polish. City summer storms lashed the skylights, rattling the panes like applause each time lightning illuminated the goddess's face. Critics from El País snuck in for early peeks. Some nodded in cautious approval, others frowned at the scar I'd left visible across the statue's sternum, a deliberate fissure filled with gold leaf kintsugi style. Delgado hated it. "Patrons prefer perfection," he hissed, circling the plinth on inspection day. "Patch the blemish or cover it with patina." I stood my ground, heart pounding. She defies erasure. The scar is her proclamation. Delgado's jaw tightened, but Lucia slid between us with a curator's smile sharp as a razor. The scar aligns with contemporary conservation discourse, embracing trauma rather than masking it. The alcaldesa will adore the symbolism. Delgado's argument died in his throat. He muttered something about modernist trends and stalked out. I blew out a shaky breath, pressing my forehead to Lucia's. "You just saved my career." He grinned. "I'm merely chiseling the bureaucratic marble. Now back to yours." The final night. Gala Eve arrived too soon. The museum emptied at dusk, leaving only cleaners' vacuums humming like distant bees. Lucia adjusted the last halogen lamp until light caressed every plane of the goddess's body. I buffed a final layer of microcrystalline wax, my arm a piston of exhaustion and exhilaration. When the clock chimed midnight, we stepped back. The sculpture, 3 meters of white maquette streaked with soft gray veins, seemed to exhale. She strode forward from her limestone field, left hand slicing air, right hand touching her mended heart of gold. Her eyes, half-lidded hollows polished to silk, looked beyond us toward something unknowable, unstoppable. Tears blurred her shape. I felt Lucia's palm find the small of my back, warm, steady. "You did it," she whispered. "We did," I wanted to say, but my mouth found hers instead. Surrounded by the smell of stone and wax, we kissed like a lightning rod meeting sky. Every nerve a live wire. Clothes came off in frantic silence. Marble dust smeared across skin, turning us into ghost statues animated by breath. Beneath the goddess's unwavering gaze, we loved each other without hurry, like 2 artisans tracing fault lines and filling them with molten gold. Afterwards we lay on drop cloths, limbs tangled, the city's neon glow pulsing through the skylight. Rain drummed its applause overhead. I rested my ear on Lucia's chest, sinking to the slow thunder of her heart. Day of unveiling. The gala bloomed bright and ostentatious, black-tie patrons swirling past flamenco guitarists, velvet banners fluttering with the museum's crest, champagne flutes chiming like tiny hammers. Cameras flashed. Delgado buzzed from donor to donor. Smile a polished weapon. Backstage, I paced in tailored trousers Lucia had insisted I buy, palms sweating despite talcum powder. She emerged from wardrobe in a dusk blue jumpsuit that hugged her ribs and bared her collarbones, the same bones I'd mapped in clay that very first dawn. My breath caught. She offered a gold pocket square, folding it into my lapel so the edge shimmered like the statue's scar. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I breathed. "Yes." A hush rippled across the hall as the director tapped a mic. Delgado introduced me with perfunctory praise, then drew a crimson cord. Velvet drapes cascaded away. Gasps filled the marble atrium, an audible intake of wonder. Spotlights set the statue aflame. The gold leaf scar caught every shard of light, scatter-casting it onto ceiling vaults like constellations. People surged forward, phones raised, but soon arms lowered, as if technology felt vulgar in the presence of something living. I watched in disbelief. A teenage girl reached out, not to touch, security would never allow, but to mirror the goddess's stride, her own fractured wrist in a cast. An elderly man wiped a tear. 2 women clasped hands, knuckles white. The room trembled with collective heartbeat. Delgado sidled over, awe softening his hawk eyes. "They're calling her La Resilient already," he murmured. "The board wants to extend the exhibit." I could barely nod. Across the crowd Lucia met my gaze, pride and something deeper blazing there. She mouthed, she breathed. "Forward always." After interviews, after flashbulbs, after the last champagne bubble burst, we slipped out a side door into the summer night. The city smelled of wet stone and fried churros from a late-night stall. Traffic thrummed like distant surf. Hand in hand, we wandered aimlessly until Plaza de España's fountains glittered ahead. We sat on warm granite, feet dangling over black water. Police sirens wailed somewhere far. Lovers laughed on rented e-scooters. The world spun on. "I used to think finishing a masterpiece would feel like a period," I said, voice husky from overuse. "But it's a comma, isn't it?" Lucia nudged my shoulder with hers. "Artists hate endings. We carve openings instead." Wind lifted her curls. Moonlight silvered the faint dust still trapped in our eyelashes. I thought of Zahara's olives, of cracked marble laced with gold, of guitar chords reverberating in empty barns. I thought of how every strike of the mallet had been a confession. "I don't know what's next," I admitted. "Madrid, Paris, some forgotten village. I only know I want you there while I figure it out." Lucia leaned in, pressed her forehead to mine. "Forward always," she whispered. "Wherever the road chips away." No triumphal anthem played. No credits rolled across the sky. The fountain lights cycled blue to violet. A scooter bell rang. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing. We sat shoulder to shoulder, breathing, letting possibility expand like wet clay between steady palms, soft, wild, and ready for the next strike of genius or fate.